They work so very hard for their family, Rose thought to herself. She put her paw on Samsa's and squeezed it slightly and smiled. Samsa squeezed back. Her smile was not so large. They ate their scones and drank their tea in silence for a while. Brooklyn opened the book again and turned the page. On there was a large flaming crescent moon and the words Chibri in gold script underneath it. There was a small lantern etched above the moon and inside was a tiny blue flame. Barklin studied the drawing, turned the page, and closed the book. You have an astounding collection of old books, said Barklin. Oh, yes. Mother and Father used to collect them when we lived in the city. You should have seen the library of our old home. It's immense. Walls and walls of books as far as the eye could see. Freestanding shelves of them, too, said Tamas, fondly remembering his old home. They brought the very best of them with us when we moved into the forest, said Samsa. Dad used to study the old magic books from the earlier eras, and Mother was always fascinated with military movements from the past wars. They would spend hours discussing their points of view on the subjects, and every night they would read for a few hours before going to bed. It was a wonderful way to live. We always had the best bedtime stories, said Tamas. I always enjoyed a good story myself. I brought a few books of my own if you'd like to see them for our trip. May I keep reading this history of the Rams while we're here, said Barklin. Of course you may, said Samsa. Barklin thanked her. Shall we go out and set up our tents for the day, and then maybe we can help you start making dinner, said Rose. I can make us some nice bread if you've got some leftover wheat flour laying around. That'd be fantastic, said Samsa. We have a recipe book laying around somewhere. Would you mind writing it down in there once we're done prepping the dough? That'd be fine. May I ask for the recipe for your mother's scones? My mother's a baker, and I would really enjoy being able to share with her what we had today. Samsa was delighted. Sure, said Samsa. The travelers got up from their table and made their way out to the fire pit where they had left the bags earlier in the day and had started to make up camp. It's easier now that we don't have to set up the fire pit as well, said Samuel. Avery smiled at him and agreed. They made their tents quickly and placed their bags inside each one. Once they were done, Rose walked around the back of the fort and made her way to the kitchen through the back door. She was excited to help out Samsa with the evening meals. Samsa was waiting for her in the kitchen. She was holding a large book with silver lettering on the spine that read Amberstone Recipes. Is that your last name, Amberstone? Asked Rose. Yes, we're all Amberstones. Our father was Reginald Amberstone of the Tanzeria Amberstones. He was one of the nobility of the Tanzerian ruling class. This was his grandmother's recipe book. We've lived off of it for years and added in our own when we get in the chance. I hope to add in your bread recipe to the book today, and it's where the scone recipe is kept, which I've written out for you. She handed Rose a piece of paper covered in a fine script. Rose thanked her for it. Shall we get started with the dough? It's got to sit for a couple of hours before we can bake it, and it's worth every minute, said Rose. Sure, said Samsa. Do you mind if Lisa helps us out? She's curious of how to make mouse bread, as she put it. She's become a bit enamored with you, I think. That'd be great. We'll do many loaves so everyone can have one with dinner. Is that stew in the pot? Rose asked, pointing towards the large bubbling black pot sitting on the stove. Yes, potatoes, carrots, fish, and leeks, said Samsa. It smells wonderful, said Rose, and it should go very well with what we're going to make. Samsa popped her head through the door at the front of the kitchen and called on Lisa. She says you can come help us if you want, said Samsa. Moments later, the small raccoon came in, put her doll on the shelf by the door, and grabbed an apron hanging from a hook at about her eye level from the wall, and tied it around her waist. She washed her paws and came over to Rose. I'm ready to help, said Lisa, and smiled cheerfully. That's great. Let's lay some flour on the counter and get to work, replied Rose. They spent the next hour rolling dough into balls not much larger than Samsa's fist and let them to prove under tea towels on the kitchen counter. After they had cleaned up their mess and washed their paws, Lisa dusted off her apron, put it back on the hook on the wall, and retrieved her dolly that had been watching them work from its vantage point on the shelf by the window. Samsa brewed some tea and poured it over ice, and they made their way back to the main sitting area under the skylight. Barklin was there reading his book, and Averly sat behind him reading up on the history of the area's book he had left on the table for her. Samuel was lying on the floor drawing in his sketchbook. One of the raccoons was sitting in a chair holding his position looking out the window above him. That's great, said Samuel. We're almost done with the portrait. He made a few more lines in his book and with an ash pencil, held it up, and turned it towards the young raccoon. A large smile broke out on the raccoon's face. On the page was a young raccoon, but instead of just facing the window how he had been sitting, he was holding a sword and wearing a crown on his little brow. He looked majestic and defiant like a real king. That's me, he said excitedly. I think it's a pretty good interpretation of what you could become, said Samuel. He put the sketchbook down and tore a page from the book and, placing it over the drawing, rubbed it with his paw. Then he lifted it, and a reverse copy of the drawing could be seen on the underside of the page. He gave the artwork to the young raccoon, who thanked him mightily for the gift and turned towards the ladies as they sat down with their drink. Glad to see you finished your work for the meal, said Samuel. Did you draw Tony's portrait? Asked Samsa. Yes, you have to draw while working at a smithery. My father is our town's blacksmith. The designers are expensive and it's cheaper just to learn to draw than ask someone else to do it for you, said Samuel. I've been doing it since I was a child, but I really get to do portraits. That was a lot of fun. He brought the sketchbook over to them and showed them the young royal's portrait. That's really good, said Rose. I didn't know you could draw like that. Like I said, it's mostly weapons and schematics for orders, but I do love to do a portrait once in a while. Here, take a look. Your portrait's in there somewhere. He handed the booklet over to Rose, and she opened it for the first page. It read, Property of Samuel Weebach. If found, please bring to Markle Smithery in Misselhop. Reward if returned. She flipped through the pages, going from drawings of swords, weapons, and armors to the first portrait. One of her sitting on the bridge by the river, smiling, looking out over the water in red wax pencil. She smiled at him. That's great, said Rose enthusiastically. There's one of Barkland and Averley, too, in the middle of the bridge of the forest. I try to draw every day so I don't get rusty, and it helps keep my paws busy when I'm too tired to walk but want to relax, said Samuel. There were scores of drawings. Rose flipped through them all until she had come to a blue ink piece of Barkland sitting with his nose in a book. Samuel must have been sitting with him while he read and made that to keep himself occupied, thought Rose. Barkland's eyes lifted from the Netherine book as he skimmed the drawing and smiled himself impressed. She flipped on through until she got to the black-cashed pencil drawing of Averley, sitting by the fire from one of their days of walking. It must have been morning, judging by how the light cut across her face, illuminating the small blue tattoo that was traced under her left eye. She looked half asleep, but pleasant enough. Rose moved on through the book, looking out over the drawing of the bridge, and then coming to the final drawing about halfway through the sketchbook of the raccoon prince, smiled and closed the book. I love them, said Rose. You'll have to show me the others as you make them. Samuel blushed and agreed to do so. Thank you. I will, said Samuel. He took the book and put that and the ash pencil back into his back pocket. He fidgeted with his paws slightly after putting them in his lap. She likes them, he thought. How great is that? Sansa brought over a glass of iced tea each to the Badger and Otter as Tamas came from the back of the house where he had been napping. He stretched his arms over his head and yawned. Everything all right? Tamas asked. Yes, the rolls are waiting to rise while we enjoy a drink. Lisa learned how to twist the dough to make them perfectly round, said Samsa, pointing her paw at the little one that sat and drank her tea. Her doll sat on the table and had a small china cup itself sitting in front of it. Lisa finished her tea and asked to be excused. Upon being allowed to leave, she got up, took her glass and her doll's cup back to the kitchen sink, and came back out. She asked Tony if he wanted to play hide-and-seek with her outside. Tony agreed, and they made their way throughout the front door and out into the yard. You're right, Lisa yelled and ran off. Tony could be heard counting up to 30 and then running off yelling, Ready or not, here I come. Tamas sat back at the table and stretched again. Good nap? Asked Barkland over the edge of his book. Great. It's the only way to handle these kids all day. It's just a small one after lunch. Sometimes the younglings join me and I'll tell them a small story before we go to bed. But sometimes, like today, I get to rest peacefully by myself for an hour and catch up on some much-needed rest. Those are my favorite kinds of naps, said Tamas. The animals laughed and agreed that they must be the best kind. They spent the rest of the day talking about the rams, the Amberstone history, and why they moved out into the forest in the first place if they had such a nice place in the city itself. Mom used to work at the library by the house that Dad frequented. He was studying the old magics of various sects, and she was his librarian. He would spend hours reading with her, sitting just a few feet from her, said Tamas. Mom said she used to watch him read for hours on end until finally she worked up the courage to ask him out on a date, said Samsa, smiling. They ended up moving in together, and we were born a couple of years later. We would spend hours with them at the library playing make-believe and building forts with the books while they worked. He was trying to find a connection between the magic that animals use today and what they used throughout the ages. He was having great success until he read about the Netherine god and his followers, said Tamas. I used to sit between his legs under the table while he read. He would be there for hours, and each time he finished a book, he would place it down near me on the ground. I would add it to the fort I was building and even pretend there were evil animals running around trying to get me. I would protect Samsa while she napped under the table. We spent so much time in that library that it was like our second home. What was the library like? Said Barkland. Huge! Absolutely massive, said Samsa. There were bookshelves 40 feet tall and all filled with the books of the surrounding areas. Hundreds of years of material was kept there between those walls. Father had special access to them for his research. He was working for the local government trying to figure out a way to bring up magic back into popular use for the good of the country. That's fascinating. I'd love to visit if we ever made it to the city, said Barkland. You'll have plenty of time to do that after we finish the ceremony, said Rose. Barkland nodded and went back to his book. Mother and Father used to bring their favorite books home with them so they could dissect the work and find out more about the history of the animals they used to practice their various magic. His favorite were healing green and white magic, types used in medicine and tend to various natural elements, said Samsa. He read us a story once of an otter that used to plant oaks down by the river of his local town and then enchant them to grow to full size within a few days. They used the lumber to rebuild the town once after it had been washed away in a flood. And other stories include how healers would come through various lands committing miraculous things to the sick and ill-fated, said Tamis. He pointed to the book Barklin was reading. Then he found that one. It consumed him. He thought that all the other books that made reference to Netherine and his followers were written in a sort of code that would tell you where to find some great weapon of old or some way to meet the god himself if the right incantations were used. He brought us out here when we were still young because the book pointed to the fact that the clan's greatest sect was still active in the forest and had the fort built so we could have a place to live so he could study them. Then one night they just disappeared and we haven't heard from them since. It's been a year since we last saw them, but we don't know what else to do other than to stay here and look after the younglings until they're old enough to go off on their own. Then we can start searching for them properly. Sorry you're stuck here without your parents, said Rose, but you're both doing a wonderful job taking care of so many without them. The raccoons could see that she was being sincere and thanked her for the compliment. Shall we go and check on the rolls for dinner and get them started? Asked Samsa to Rose. She agreed, and they went back to the kitchen. Samuel looked at Tamis and said, We could help you find them once we're done with our travel. Where are you headed? Said Tamis. Samuel told him about their rite of passage in Marlin's tomb, miles to the east of the forest, and how they were to travel there to drop their names off at the community area and come back before a part of their town in the proper manner. Tamis stretched back in his chair and thought a while. That would be most helpful if you could keep an eye out for two raccoons, one brown and white, the other silver and white. Dad's a lot taller than Mom, and he has a distinctive mustache that would make him easy to spot in a crowd, said Tamis, and placed his fingers by his cheeks and pulled outward, indicating the style of the curvy mustache he remembered his father having. Mom wears a gold chain around her neck with a yellow amethyst. It was her grandmother's, and she never left the house without it. We'll keep an eye out for them, and if we find them, we'll let them know how you're doing and try to get them to come back to the forest to give you two much-deserved breaks, said Samuel. Tamis sighed. That would be great. It's very tiring looking after so many mouths each day, and some days I wish I had time for myself so I could go out and send a letter to the Tanzania police office or our house steward to let them know what's going on. Actually, could you do something for me? I know it's rude to impose, but do you think on your way back from your trip you could swing by the police station in Tanzania and let them know of us and what's going on? They may be able to send some help down or be able to bring us back up to the family home so we could at least be more comfortable up there. The old house was pretty large and could easily fit the rest of the family in it, and it would give us a chance to get them into the schools and playing with other animals so they could socialize with others properly. I know it's a bother, but we could really use the help, said Tamis. We'll talk about it tonight, whether we can help out now or after we get back from the tomb. But in the meantime, write a letter for the constables there, and we'll see what we can do, said Samuel, looking at Barklin and Averley. I'm sure Rose wouldn't have a problem helping out once we're able to do so. Barklin and Averley agreed. We would be more than happy to help you find your parents, or at least get some help to get out of the woods, said Averley. Barklin and Samuel nodded with her. Rose popped her head through the door and said, Rolls are ready. Sam's just sent Lisa to get the children ready for dinner, and we should make ourselves useful and help set the tables out the back. Travelers got up and moved into the kitchen to collect the bowls the cutlery needed to eat. Averley grabbed a stack of plates for the rolls as Rose placed the steaming bread into a basket lined with white linen cloth, wrapping the bread once the basket had been filled. Barklin grabbed 2 heavy cloth pads and moved the large pot of stew that had been simmering all day out into the courtyard to serve the family their dinner. Samuel grabbed a bundle of spoons and napkins from the drawers under the kitchen counter after Samsa showed him where to look for them. She rubbed her paws on her apron and said, Lovely, this should be an easy meal tonight. She moved with the others out into the backyard and underneath the canopies. Tamis came out and moved to a large metal triangle that hanged beneath the nearest canopy on a small wooden pole and rang it 3 times. Dinner's ready, he yelled, and a score's pair of feet could be heard making their way around and through the building and into the backyard for dinner. Everyone line up and Barklin will serve you your food, said Tamis. The young raccoons did as they were told, and the lines wrapped around the side of the building back around near the kitchen door. Averley and Rose took the bread and plates and placed one, then the other on the tables in neat rows. They moved quickly and deliberately as their small raccoons were each given a bowl by Samuel and poured a helping of stew from Barklin. They went back to their spot at the table and sat down and waited patiently for the others to get their dinner before starting their own. Each of the raccoons thanked Barklin and Samuel as they passed. Finally, once all the small animals had been fed, Tamis, Samson, and the others waited to serve themselves as Tamas went back to the triangle and stood underneath it. He looked at all of his brothers and sisters and smiled broadly. "Enjoy your meals, everybody, and please thank Rose for her rolls," said Tamas. A chorus of "Thank you, Rose," echoed from the tables and out into the late afternoon air. "You're very welcome," said Rose enthusiastically, and smiled at them all. Tamas rang the bell and said, "Dig in, everybody." The children did just that. Once the children started to eat, tearing off pieces of bread to dip into their steaming stew, gathering chunks of potatoes and carrots and scooping them into their mouths with varying degrees of success, some falling back into their bowls with a tiny splash of broth reaching for them, the older animals serving themselves. Rose grabbed an armful of rolls and, leaving the basket out of the pot for those that wanted seconds, and moved into the house to sit at the oval table and enjoy their meal in peace. Once they were situated, Samson went back into the kitchen and came out with a pitcher full of iced and tea she had made for them while they had gotten the children ready, and poured each of them a large glass of light green-yellow liquid. They sat and ate their meal, and Samson brought Rose up to speed on Tamas's request to help them with their parents. Rose sat for a moment thinking of what to do, and said, "We should help them now. It's okay if the ceremony takes longer than some to finish. There's no time limit on the travel as long as we check in with them on occasion, which we can do throughout the mail system of the town." "I agree. It won't hurt to go and check on their family's house to see if anyone is there before we get back to our trip, and if no one is there, we can go to the police station and get someone to help us," said Barklin. He removed the pouch from around his neck and pulled the book with the maps of the area from it. Okay, well, I'm taking a break, so I might as well do some ads. This is my first one, so bear with me. So, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's pretty cool. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And all you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day. So Anchor is asking me to ask you to support me financially. I would ask that you go to my Patreon to do that, which is patreon.com/divergentmind. It means you can either become a monthly subscriber at a different tier of $1 to $3 to $5. I'm not looking for a lot. I'm not asking for a lot. I'm not asking for anything. This is going to go to the end of my podcast. I don't like it when podcasts straight up ask you for money when I'm doing okay. Well, I'm not doing okay. I'm surviving now to the point that I can make this. I would love to be able to make improvements to this by, say, getting... So basically, I'm running off an iPad, and I would like to improve it by getting different things that would make it better. Maybe some headphones that monitor output, or a better mic, though the mic I got was from JWife, so I might not even use the better mic. You know what I mean? It's all about whatever I need at the time, but really it's just to get healthy again, because I'm currently over 300 pounds and I don't want to die that young. I would really like to be able to afford some vegetables so I can go back to my vegetarian diet, because being this big sucks. And I'm happy to sit in a chair all day, but I really got to walk my butt off, literally. So that's what the money would be for. It would be for healthy food, because I can't afford it. I can afford ramen and pasta and rice and beans, but I can't live on carbs, because that's how you get this big on antipsychotics. Junk food and carbs, which is just cheap and plentiful around me. So I would like to leave my house and just lose some weight. And to do that, I would like to go to the store and buy some vegetables, please. But you don't have to do anything. I'm not asking you to. I'm not begging. I'll figure it out on my own. Much pleasure, Jay.
Hey, people, take a listen to the Divergent Mind podcast. You get both insight into living with a serious mental illness and get to listen to a lovely tale about a journey cute little animals need to take. Don't miss out, and remember, divergent minds don't need to think alike.